I am here to talk to you a little bit about Innovation Way, and I will make my presentation as brief as possible. Essentially, what I'd like to do is share with you a series of observations that may help you think about Innovation Way, perhaps in a little different manner than we've been used to talking about it here in Orange County. And so let me do that without any further ado. Let me share my first observation with you, and this is an observation that comes, and it's all research-based, and that is that educated people generate community wealth. Now, why do I say this? Well, because lots of people around the country are saying this. I've given you a couple of quotes. The first is from a Dr. Edward Glaser. Dr. Glaser recently penned a book entitled The Triumph of the City. He is a professor at Harvard University, which of course the county has a relationship with Harvard right now. And he also, interestingly, is probably most famous for a paper that he wrote entitled What Makes a City Entrepreneurial? And we're talking about entrepreneurism here in Orange County. And what Dr. Glaser would tell you is that it's all about smart entrepreneurial people. They are the ultimate source of any city's economic power. The other quote that I offer to you today is from Dr. Richard Florida. Many of you have probably heard of Dr. Florida. He's a professor at the University of Toronto currently. He wrote a book recently entitled The Great Reset, but his most famous book is probably The Rise of the Creative Class. But Dr. Florida has been here to this community a couple of times over the past decade. And Dr. Florida observed very recently, back in December of last year, that smart people of the highly educated sort that economists refer to as human capital are key engines of economic growth and development. So if you look at the data on this is data that we compiled. It's all census data and coming out of Esri, which is the nation's largest data provider. What I'm showing you is the top 100 metropolitan cities in terms of size, and I'm simply showing you the relationship between the percentage of your workforce that has a college degree and the per capita income in your community. Now, per capita income is defined as the total amount of income to a community divided by the total number of people. The total number of people, that's per capita income. And we talk about that as community wealth. So in essence, what this chart is telling you is that the more people that you have in your community that have college degrees, the more well-off your community will be. And that's all members of your community, not just the people with college degrees, because there's a distributive effect of people, smart, talented, educated people like Dr. Glaser and Dr. Florida have talked about. By the way, if you're wondering where Florida ranks on this chart, well, I'm sorry, Orlando ranks on this chart, and when I use the term Orlando during this presentation, I'm talking about the metropolitan statistical area. Orange County, Osceola County, Seminole County, and Lake County, 2 million people. And so when we look at Orlando, Orlando has about 26.6% of its workforce that has college degrees and about $26,000 of per capita income. The communities on the right of the chart obviously have higher levels of education. Those are communities like Washington, D.C., Raleigh, Boston, San Francisco. Communities on the other side of the chart with lower levels of education have lower levels of community wealth. We know this is true. It's intuitive to us because we know on an individual level, the more education that we have, the more money that we're likely to earn. So this is data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It shows you the amount that is expected to be earned by an individual that has a high school dropout is about $22,000 a year, all the way up to if you earned a professional degree or a doctoral degree, you can expect to earn $80,000 a year. So in red is anybody there that wouldn't be termed as having a college degree. You can see the spreads between $20,000 and let's say $35,000 versus if you earn a college degree, your spread is between $55,000 and $80,000. I actually guest lectured at Oviedo High School and showed this chart to a bunch of AP 12th graders yesterday and told them, stay in school if you don't believe me, just look at the data. We also know that these people are not only likely to earn more money, but they're also more likely to have a job. This is unemployment rates by educational attainment. If you're a high school dropout in this country currently, your expected unemployment rate is 14%. If you have a bachelor's degree or higher, your expected unemployment rate is 4%. So these educated people in these communities are earning more money and they're more likely to have a job. All right, so I think that's a pretty straightforward observation that supported lots of data nationwide. Here's the second observation, and this is perhaps the one that's of more interest to this board. These educated people are currently leaving Orlando, metropolitan Orlando. And let me show you the data on that. This is your workforce. This is Orlando's workforce, anybody that's age 25 and over. This is 2009 data, which is the latest data that we have. We're waiting for the Census Bureau to report out 2010 data on this. And this shows you your workforce by educational attainment. Right? So on the left side of your chart there are people with high school degrees, and on the right side of your chart are people with graduate degrees. Now you can see in Orlando we have many more people with high school degrees than we do with graduate degrees, and we expect that. We've traditionally been a service-based economy. But I want to call your attention to the fact that I've segmented it by the last 3 years, 2007, 2008, and 2009. And Metro Orlando during the last 3 years actually had positive population growth. We had 36,000 people show up in this community. That's really good. That's a fantastic thing to happen. But when we segment it by educational attainment, we see of that 36,000, what really happened was 47,000 people showed up that did not have college degrees, and 11,000 people with college degrees left the area. In fact, when we look at the highest levels of educational attainment, which are people with graduate degrees, we see that almost 8,000 people with graduate degrees have left metropolitan Orlando over the past 3 years. So if we know that those educated people drive community wealth, that starts to call that into question. Let me show you another community in the nation that we might be wanting to take a look at. That is Austin. We know that just as educated people are leaving Orlando, educated people are arriving in Austin. Here's the same data set for Austin over the same time period, 2007 to 2009. And you can see that Austin gained, at the same time that metropolitan Orlando gained 36,000, Austin gained 100,000 people. But of those 100,000 people, 46,000 of them had college degrees. In fact, 9,000 of them had graduate degrees. So it's almost as if you could take those 8,000 people with graduate degrees from metropolitan Orlando, put them all in their moving vans, and send them over to Austin, Texas. So the good news is that metropolitan Orlando continues to have population growth. In fact, it's one of only 34 cities in the country that saw population growth in its workforce between 2007 and 2009. And here are those cities. And there's cities that you will recognize, cities like Raleigh or San Antonio, Charlotte, San Diego. And this is a very busy chart, but let me make the chart a little bit clearer for us here. Here's where I only show you the population growth with people with college degrees. And of those 34 cities, metropolitan Orlando was the only one of those cities, the only one, that lost people with college degrees from 2007 to 2009. You can see even such cities as Las Vegas, which is a distressed market, Riverside, California, which has the highest foreclosure amounts in the country, grew their educated population over that time. You can also see there are some cities like Dallas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and on up to New York City that had extraordinary amounts of educated people move into their metropolitan region over the time period 2007 to 2009. If we look at it on a percentage basis instead of the raw numbers, you can see Orlando again having a negative percentage. You can see that even cities like Tucson, Arizona had about 10%. Most of the cities had at least 30% of their new population, the new workforce, with college degrees. In fact, if you look at places like Raleigh, Boston, Kansas City, they're all over 50%. If you get to Chicago, it's interesting. It's actually 110%. So you would ask, well, how would that be? Well, actually what happened in Chicago is that they gained people that had college degrees and lost people that did not have college degrees. They actually sent people out of the city that didn't have, on a net basis, that did not have college degrees. If we look at it over a longer time period, because maybe this recession is just distorting our view of metropolitan Orlando, let's look at the last decade of data that we have from 2000 to 2009. You can see that metropolitan Orlando still ranked next to last in the percentage of new workforce that it gained with college degrees. It gained about 37% of its people over that time period with college degrees, which only beat Riverside, California, and was just below Las Vegas and Phoenix. By the way, again, if you look at those last 4 cities, Riverside, Orlando, Vegas, and Phoenix, they show up on your top 10 foreclosure lists month after month. There are some cities like Washington, D.C., New York City that had extraordinary percentages of their population locate with college degrees. And just in case this recession is still coloring our data set here, let's take one more look at it. Let's subtract 2007 to 2009, so the area of significant, the time period of significant economic distress here. And you'll see that Orlando still ranks below average. Fortunately, just above Salt Lake City, interestingly, where I know a delegation went last week, and San Antonio, but below places like Nashville and Atlanta, also in the state below Tampa, and significantly below Miami. So what this tells us is that even when we were growing population at extraordinary rates here in metropolitan Orlando, we were having real trouble attracting people with college degrees relative to these other metropolitan regions. So here's the third observation. First observation being that these educated people matter. They generate community wealth. The second observation being that educated people are leaving Orlando, and therefore, using logic, we know that Orlando is losing community wealth. We are actually, at this point, sending away people that generate wealth and income for this community. Let me show you what that looks like on the chart. I've plotted the 34 cities we just looked at. These are all cities that are growing cities. They all had over 30,000 people show up in them over the 2007 to 2009. Orlando on that chart ranks second to last on per capita income, just ahead of Tucson, a little bit ahead of San Antonio, but well below cities that we would consider our competitive set. Dallas, Phoenix, Salt Lake City, San Diego, Baltimore, and Atlanta. And the problem is when you start to lose these types of people from your city, you are heading the wrong way on that chart. You are decreasing your per capita income. Here's the real challenge for us. We've invested significant capital in this community. In our medical city, over $1.5 billion of public and private capital are in there right now. And we are competing against other life science clusters around the country. I've lit up for you in green the cities that were put forward by the Milken Institute in its 2006 study that called for Metropolitan Orlando to create the UCF Med School. So these are cities, these are not my cities, these are cities put forward by the Milken Institute. And you can see that all of these cities are significantly higher in percentages of people with college degrees and therefore per capita income than Orlando. And the real issue for us is that while we're heading to the left side of the chart, meaning we're losing those people, those cities are all gaining those people. The only way to compete with those cities is to start to attract educated people to this community again. When you attract educated people to the community, you increase the amount of people with college degrees, you will increase the per capita income in the community. And you can see an increase from, let's say, 27% up to 35% in people with college degrees would then correspond to an increase of about $6,000 per capita in income. Now, there's 2 million people in metropolitan Orlando, and if you do the math on $6,000 per person, you're talking about $2 billion. I'm sorry, $12 billion. If I could do the math, it'd be better. $12 billion in overall income. And that's something we'd all like to have right now. Why does income matter? Well, because it gives us options. It allows us to invest that in a personal level, whether we want to buy a new automobile, buy a new home, pay more for a home, whether we want to invest that at a community level and build roads or schools or parks. It gives us options. When you're losing income from a community, you are losing options, and you are becoming less competitive, therefore.